Okay, thank you for coming. I want to thank Caroline for, for everything that she has done. The way she organized it is amazing. So thank you. Well, I'm excited to tell you this all because we're gonna talk about big contemporary history, the things that aren't in the history books yet, and the news tell about these issues but not very accurately. So we will do that today. If we look at history, the century before our birth, we have the First World War, the Great Depression, the Second World War, the Cold War. But what is next? That's what we will talk about. And if you look at it, history is just a period of suffering followed by another period of suffering. And if you have any questions, I would like to ask you to save them for the end of the lecture. Okay, so what defines this period? What defines our lifetime? Well, of course we have to talk about the European Union, which is important because, it kind of came into existence after two major wars, and it was finally a sign of peace. But of course there are also problems with it. For example, the Brexit, it was a choice between better economy or more sovereignty, and Britain chose for more sovereignty over their immigration policy. And then of course we have Greece, which lied about its debts kind of more or less, and the other members kind of had to pay for that to avoid Greece going bankrupt. And of course Hungary and Poland, President Orban of Hungary and Poland, they fire judges just because they don't listen to what they want them to do. There's propaganda on the state channel, so the European Union isn't perfect, it's flawed. Well, of course, global warming. Well, you probably know some facts about it. For example, that the half of the ice of the North Pole has already melted. So I think it really has to go really wrong before we wake up. But what can we do if the big polluters, Russia, India, China, and the USA, don't care about any of it, especially now our President Trump is in power. And African population will grow and people will have more prosperity, so that also means even more global warming. But what do we want? Do we want less people and less prosperity? That's the alternative, which probably some on the radical left would want. I've heard that opinion several times. And now we see, well, at least it's a good thing that we see young people in our country protesting against global warming. Because this is one of the few issues that young people probably understand better than adults. But the thing is, the adults then say, well, if they care so much about the climate, why do they drive cars? Why do they fly to Thailand by plane? Well, it's a very cynical posture, I think. It's you know, you can't say that to people who want to make the world better. You know, you can't say you can't fly or you can't drive cars. You just have to make sure that the cars and the planes become cleaner, and it's really possible. But the big polluting companies are just, and the politicians too, are just very conservative, and you know, conservatism is kind of the antonym of moving forward. So, well, okay, that's global warming. Well, the rise of China, well, we don't have much time to discuss it, but it's becoming an issue in the future. Social media, of course, presidents communicating on Twitter. Some say they shouldn't do it, but well, everyone, you know, it's really the age of social media. You know, we're busy with it all day, and you know, there are some cool things on it, but I also think it's kind of things like Facebook and Snapchat, for example, are really a kind of a race for who has the best life. It's showing off, kind of. So that's what I would advise someone with depression, for example. Don't look at it, because it's not helpful at all. Okay, so that was social media, but there's one thing that many historians agree on, and that's the notion that the 21st century only really started with the 9/11 terrorist attacks, because you could say that it is the beginning of a series of events. Think of the invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq, and wars all over the Middle East. Syrian civil war, we will discuss that one. Libya, and of course there was a refugee crisis and reaction to this from the radical left and the radical right. And there's one other concept that we will discuss today, which Caroline and I thought was very interesting, which is that you know, the country where you live defines a lot in how you see the world. It's especially with politicians. You know, many of them are anti-Russia and pro-America, and is this just divide at all? And for example, the fact that many people in the Middle East believe those conspiracy theories. I'm sure you've heard of the conspiracy theories of 9/11 and deep state, and we'll discuss that. But you know, I don't believe in them, but there's a reason why people believe in them, and they're kind of valid, you would say. Well, let's start with the war in Yemen, to try to understand how the Middle East works and how the politics work there. Well, it's as things stand now, it's the Sunni president al-Hadi against Shia militias, the Houthis, and well, you probably know the schism between Sunni and Shia Islam. Shia Islam said that Prophet Muhammad's cousin Ali should be his successor, and Sunni Muslims say no, it has to be just the best man we can find, you know, that should be his successor. So the Sunni president against the Shia Houthi militias. And of course, the Sunni president is backed by Saudi Arabia, and the Houthis, the Shia Houthis, are backed by Iran. That's kind of how it works in all those wars that are fought in the Middle East. And if you, well, there's kind of a thing that happens every time in those wars. It's that Saudi Arabia kind of funds everything that is Sunni Islam. It doesn't matter. It's even terrorism, for example. So they supported, financially supported the Taliban in Afghanistan. We'll also talk about that. But in Yemen it's the same. They support the Sunni president, and America is selling the Saudis weapons to kill people. Maybe you've heard of the news article that 40 children were killed in a bombing in a school bus. 40 children dead, and it was the bomb was dropped by the Saudis, but it was an American bomb. The Saudis are buying weapons from the Americans, and you know, the Saudis sell oil to America, so that's the deal, and that's, you know, and the West is kind of making money over the backs of the people in Yemen. That's kind of what happens. Okay. Well, the reason why. Well, let's start first about some more information about Saudi Arabia. For example, the human rights. You probably heard about it that. Saudi women couldn't drive cars until 2018. They have to wear a niqab whenever they go out, and they can't leave the house without a man accompanying them. If you have visited Israel, you can't visit Saudi Arabia anymore, so it's an anti-Semitic policy. People get arrested, tortured, or sentenced to death for no good reason. If you're homosexual, you can get beheaded, and it's a public occasion.